Hi there, it's Gabrielle Nicolay from SpeechKids, and today I wanted to talk to you about sound development. And it's something that parents ask me a lot about, and so I just wanted to lay out some guidelines and answer some questions about speech sound development. And before I do that, I want to give you a little lesson on the difference between speech and language, because it gets important when we talk about sounds. So basically, the short answer is what comes out of your mouth while you're talking is speech. What happens in your brain when you're thinking and putting words around your thoughts, that part is language. So when we're talking about sounds, we're talking about speech. So anyway, just thought you should know. So there is, it turns out, a developmental order of when speech sounds come in childhood, and it tends to be from sort of the most visible to the least visible. So if you think about your babies are doing ba, 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 right? Ba is a sound that we make in the front of our mouths. It's really visible. Babies can see their parents doing it. And that's one that tends to come out really early. Ba, ba, pa, pa, ma, ma, all those easy ones. As things get more complicated, you move further back in the mouth, there's more movement required, there's more transitions between sounds that are required. But one thing that comes up a lot is when kids get to be about 3 years old, and they're pretty understandable to most people. Their speech at 3-year-olds tend to have pretty good speech, pretty clear speech. But they may still make some mistakes, some error sounds. So, a child who's 3 may tell you that they're fui, right? Or that they're fi. There are lots of different ways to modify that TH sound. TH is a really late developing sound, it turns out. Some kids don't get it until they're 6 or 7. My little neighbor, who was so clear from the minute she could speak, she did not develop a TH sound until she was 6. And that was fine. There was nothing wrong with her. She did not need speech therapy. And now it's a distant memory. She's 15 years old. Another sound that parents ask me a lot about is R's, right? So kids, they drive their cars. And so, again, if your child is 3, that's completely typical. And R is such a hard sound, right? It's not visible. It's made with a peculiar tongue movement. And I don't know why this is. R is like difficult in every language, which is kind of funny. But anyway, that's an aside. So R has a developmental range of when it comes in. And some charts have it at 8 years old. That some kids really won't have an R until they're 8. So when parents of a 5-year-old say, my child is really clear when he talks, but he doesn't have an R, I almost always say, don't worry about it. Enjoy it while it's here, and it'll go away on its own. And if it doesn't go away, and it's just the R, that's a quick fix, usually. There are things that speech therapists can do to tweak the way a child is producing an R, and that's better done later because you need the kiddo to be thinking about where his tongue is and all that kind of stuff. But so it's a real easy fix most of the time. S is another one, and S can be a little tricky because S can be a little bit slushy, like shuji, shells, she shells, right? So I'm mushy, for a clinical term. That is a little bit trickier for speech therapists, and I think if you ask 3 speech therapists, you probably get 5 different answers on what should be done about that. And so that's maybe worth asking a question about, but S is also it's a later developing sound. So if a 3-year-old is saying an S like that, I'm tempted to just kind of say, if that's the only thing going on, I say, yeah, it's okay, let it go, watch it, see what happens. If it's getting worse, go see a speech therapist. If it's getting better, keep watching and watch it disappear on its own. No big deal. So TH, S, R, SH, right? That sh sound is hard for kids. And if they don't have it when they're 3, when they're 4, it's fine. Again, all of this assumes that people can understand what your child is saying, right? So there is a progression of sound development. It's pretty predictable. And so in kids whose speech is typically developing, you'll see this progression. And so sometimes kids are clear from the moment they begin talking, and sometimes their speech evolves and gets clearer as they get to be better speakers. A general rule of thumb, by the time a kid is 3 years old, they should be intelligible to, certainly 100% of the time, to you, and more than 75% of the time to other people, even when those other people don't know what the child is saying. So, 3-year-olds are pretty competent talkers, or they should be. Certainly by 4, 100% of what your 4-year-old says to anybody at any time should be understandable. But, if sometimes they're mixing up their R's, or they are talking about the twain, it's okay. The train, by the way. It's okay if that's the only thing that's going on. So speech sounds evolve, and that's pretty great. It's pretty interesting. There's one other thing that came up today with a little guy, and I wanted to mention that as it relates to speech. Sometimes very young children will do things to make the words easier to say. And these are called, you want the fancy term, phonological processes. Things that happen, things that kids do to sounds and words to make them easier to say. So, for example, this little guy was saying bop for the word blocks, which is sort of interesting, right? There's a couple of different things that's going on. Mostly what he's doing is he's using the same sound in the front of the word and in the back of the word. When you use the same sound, it makes it easier to say. So you might notice that your kid does this, that your little guy does this. At age 2, that's really okay. At age 3, it starts to be less okay. So, again, if with all of this stuff, if you have questions, that's a speech and language therapist's job, is to figure out, is this in the range of typical, or is this somewhere out of that range? And speech therapists have really good information about that, and they can make really good judgment calls. So if at any point as a parent you're like, wow, I just really don't know if this is okay, ask somebody. What's the worst that can happen? They say your child needs a little bit of speech therapy. If you're worried about it and wondering about it, go ask somebody who knows, who can tell you the answer. So that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.